Welcome back to COS Live. My name is Andrew Lusch. I'll be your host for this episode. And of course, I am joined by my co-host, my partner in crime, Rita Peters, who is the Senior VP of Legislative and Grassroots Affairs. Rita, it is 2026. It's a new year. I am so excited to be with you for our first episode of the year. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Andrew, and it's great to be back with you during Capitol season of 2026. And there is no better reason for us to be doing a live broadcast than the reason we have today, right?
That's right. There is no better reason. We are starting this year off with a bang. We're going to the Kansas House of Representatives today. We have a floor debate for SCR 1604. That's our Convention of States resolution. It's the second reading. It's going to be a very spirited debate. Kansas is in the running today to become state number 20. Before we get into the rundown of the program, though, we do have Deanna Becket with us, and she is the regional director of the Wild West region and also the regional director of Kansas. Deanna, great to be with you. You're in the Capitol right now. You're in Topeka. Tell us how the energy in the room is right now. How's everything going?
It is amazing. It's a small group today because this is the debate and the vote. We expect the final vote tomorrow. Can I say that? But we expect some great excitement. There's probably about a dozen or 20 grassroots in the House gallery right now. And we spent the morning meeting and greeting a few of them and interviewing a few of them as well, capturing their excitement. And you'll be able to see a little bit of that as we go forward over the next probably 48 hours. I'm jittery. My stomach is doing a little bit of flip-flopping. And it's just exciting to be here. This is my very first time in the Topeka Capitol. And it was kind of shocking when I was talking to Dave Schneider and Mark Meckler this morning. They were like, "This is your first time?" I said, "Yeah, because Kansas Grassroots has had this and has this mastered for so many years that they do it all and they do it well."
And Deanna, you haven't been a regional director for too long. If Kansas does pass the COS application tomorrow and become state number 20, will this be your first state to pass the COS application?
This will be my first state because we haven't passed a state since 2022. And I was an assistant regional director at that time. So it is, it's exciting. I always say I have done hardly any of the work. I support these folks that are on the ground, that have invested thousands and thousands of miles, and as a group probably have invested thousands and thousands of dollars in gas money and hotel money. And they are so worthy of what is coming today.
So how would you describe the mood of the grassroots who are there with you so far?
They are excited. They're giddy. They are, focused on getting some of the tasks done that we want to talk to everybody, and they're confident.
Mm-hmm. So, Deanna, any plans for after the debate? Are you going to come back on? Are you going to come back on with a grassroots volunteer to talk about the debate and what happens next?
Yes, that is the plan. I hear things starting to roll in the House, probably doing their gaveling in, and it's a little noisy. And then when the vote is done, we've of course instructed the grassroots not to hoop and holler, not to applaud out loud, and to exit quietly and have some excitement and enthusiasm in the hallway. And I hope to capture some of that live after we're done with the vote.
Awesome. Well, Deanna, we got to have you back when after the debate. Like you said, we'd love to get your perspective on how things go. You have our thoughts and prayers. We know this is very exciting for you and exciting for the grassroots. It's really exciting for the entire nation because all eyes are on Kansas today and tomorrow. We're so excited. So please hang around, and we will talk to you in just a little bit. So with that, Rita, why don't we get our viewers caught up with the progress nationally and just what we're doing here today?
Sure. Well, 19 states have already passed our resolution calling for an Article 5 convention to propose amendments to the U.S. Constitution on 3 subjects: imposing fiscal restraint on the federal government, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and setting term limits for federal officials and members of Congress. These are 3 common sense solutions that the people have long wanted. Polling across the nation backs that up. But Congress is never going to do it. So we have to use the Article 5 convention process to bypass Congress. Now we need 34 states, 2/3 according to Article 5. And Kansas right now is in the driver's seat to become state number 20. We're pretty confident about that. And there has been some publicity leading up to this, right, Andrew?
Yeah, there really has. I just said a moment ago that all eyes are on Kansas. Our national grassroots, everyone's watching with bated breath to see what's going to happen in Kansas. But not only our grassroots, we have Just the News and John Solomon watching this closely. So hat tip to him. He's a great friend of ours, a great friend to Mark Meckler. So they are definitely behind us, watching closely to see what happens and how Kansas votes, and if this will open up the door for several more victories early on in capital season. So, Rita, we also have Mark Meckler on the ground in Topeka. Deanna kind of mentioned that a little bit. He's the Convention of States president and co-founder. And we have a short video. It looks like, are we going to the debate now, Garrett? Or do we have a moment for this video? Well,
I don't think the debate has started quite yet. If you're
Chair,
just
there were no committee amendments.
Yeah.
You may proceed.
Looks like they're starting, Rita. We'll come
Good
back.
morning, buddy. Okay. SCR 1604. It's the one that we are calling for a convention of states to impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limit the terms of office for members of Congress and federal officials. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Before we get started, Body, I wanted to clarify. Last week there was a point of not a point of personal privilege, point of order. Thank you. And I wanted to clarify. The rules state that we follow the order that that is in the queue. I had mistakenly selected somebody that had raised their hand. The precedent has been only for the bill carrier to allow them to raise their hand to get put in the queue, to avoid that they have to go back and forth between their desk if they're the bill carrier. So just wanted to clarify that from the beginning. I will not recognize any hands. Do push your button. The only hand that I recognize if somebody is speaking to an amendment is the bill carrier. So with that, the chair recognizes Representative Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. I rise today in opposition to this resolution, not because I dismiss concerns about federal debt mandates or overreach, but because I believe this proposal is a dangerous and unnecessary way to address them. Article 5 of the Constitution is not a casual tool. A convention of states has never been held in our nation's history. Once called, it would operate in a largely uncharted territory with unclear rules, unclear limits, and unclear enforcement mechanisms. While this resolution claims the convention would be limited, there is no settled constitutional authority guaranteeing that such limits could be enforced once a convention is convened. That is not speculation. That is a fact acknowledged by constitutional scholars across the political spectrum. The risk of a so-called runaway convention is not theoretical. Delegates could propose amendments far beyond fiscal restraints or term limits, potentially threatening fundamental rights Kansans hold dear: free speech, due process, voting rights, the right to abortion, or the balance of power between branches of government. Once proposed, those amendments would be placed before the states under enormous national pressure political spending, and polarization. We should ask ourselves, though, is opening the entire Constitution to revision truly the best way to protect liberty? I don't think so. But supporters argue this resolution honors the founders' intent. However, the founders were also deeply wary of instability. That's why Congress, not a convention, has been the vehicle for all 27 amendments to our Constitution. That process is proven, deliberate, and accountable. If Kansans want fiscal discipline, we should demand it from Congress directly. If we want term limits, we can pursue a narrowly tailored amendment through the traditional process. If federal mandates are the problem, then litigation, legislation, and elections are the powerful tools of resistance. This resolution also asks us to bind future Kansas legislatures through a continuing application, even as legal interpretations, political realities, and public will may change. That should give us pause, especially given that the people of Kansas wisely previously required a 2/3 vote because of the gravity of such an action. Restraint is not weakness, caution is not surrender, and safeguarding the Constitution sometimes means refusing to gamble with it. For these reasons, and out of respect for both the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Kansas, I urge you to vote no.
To speak next, the chair recognizes Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The issue of passing a resolution to support a convention of the states is an issue that came about 5 years ago when I came to the State House. And in that time, up until today, I look at it and it's been dissected like a skilled surgeon doing a postmortem. All of the facts, all the information. But now in 2026, I look at those facts. The postmortem results are in, and I can only conclude a convention of the states is necessary for our state to repair the federal government. Key points. A convention to reduce the scope and size of a bloated federal government allows states, such as Kansas, to initiate the change. An amendment is needed to address federal mandates and excessive spending. Now, Congress is either unwilling or unable to act. The current structure, no, they don't want to do it. It is done based, now, as we do this amendment, it's based on our existing constitutional framework. We're not making new legislation. Citizens across the nation, and in my home district, 4-1, support a convention of the states. Congress and highly paid federal officials have become wealthy at the trough of the American taxpayer. One after another, we see examples of legislators in Congress who have become wealthy in a very short time and then continue to feed at that trough until they die. The only way that we're going to come is with an amendment and term limits. So finally, as a history teacher, a convention of the state restores federalism. Federalism is a form of government we initiated with our framers and is what we need to get back to. Passage of this resolution allows the state of Kansas to get back to fulfilling the original intent of federalism. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I first ran for office back in 2018, I was opposed to the Convention of States, and that was primarily because I had a few conservative friends, conservative political activists who are opposed to the Convention of States. And I felt that they made some good arguments and had some arguments against the Convention of States. And I still wouldn't necessarily say that they don't have any arguments against the Convention of States. However, I have changed my mind on this issue, and I voted for the Convention of States in the past. I'm going to vote for it today, and I support the Convention of States. One reason for that is because my district strongly supports it. I believe there's been over 600 people in my district who have signed the Convention of States petition. I believe that's the number one issue that people in my district have contacted me about. In addition to that, I've basically just come to the conclusion that Congress is never going to fix itself or reform itself. If you look at our national debt situation, we're currently 39 trillion in debt. We've reached the point where we're at 1.1 trillion in interest per year. In the first quarter of 2026, the interest on the debt was the second largest expense in the entire federal budget, eclipsing Medicare and trailing only Social Security. The debt to GDP ratio is currently 126%, and it may be at least 145% by 2041. In my opinion, neither party is really serious about the issue of federal spending and the national debt. Neither party actually cares about being fiscally responsible. One of the goals of the Convention of States movement is to enact a balanced budget amendment through a Convention of States. In my opinion, this is the only way, the only possible way that we'll have a balanced budget at the federal level, because neither party in Washington, D.C. cares at all about fiscal responsibility. They've proven that. Our party, the Republican Party, is supposed to be the party of fiscal responsibility. However, at the federal level, the Republican Party has completely failed when it comes to being fiscally responsible, balancing the budget, paying off the national debt, and all those types of issues. So therefore, this is a grassroots movement where we can force a balanced budget on Congress through a Convention of States. In my opinion, this is the only possible way that we can ever be fiscally responsible and have a balanced budget, because Congress has over and over again proven that they simply don't care about fiscal responsibility. One of the arguments that the conservative opponents use against the Convention of States is that they argue that the Constitution should simply be enforced rather than being changed. And I don't disagree with what they say that it should be enforced. I do agree that it should be enforced. And I've personally introduced legislation that would enforce the Constitution. And basically what they mean by that is upholding the 10th Amendment, pushing back against the federal government, pushing back against federal overreach. And I do believe that we should do that. However, I personally believe that we can do both at the same time. I believe that we can push back against the federal government, push back against federal overreach, and force the Constitution. But at the same time, we can also use the tools that our founders gave us in Article 5 to propose amendments like a balanced budget amendment to force Congress to balance their budget. And so therefore, although I do believe that the opponents of the Convention of States, the conservative opponents, do have some arguments and some valid points, I support the Convention of States because Congress is simply out of control, is fiscally irresponsible, and the Convention of States is the only way that I can see to actually force them to balance the federal budget. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, body. I want to just make a couple of comments about this concurrent resolution. I think when we look at this, there are two underlying assumptions that we have to make. One is that we're dissatisfied with some things about the United States federal government. I think we can reach agreement on that pretty fast. That's been the case for over 250 years. But we established our federal government as a limited constitutional republic where the Constitution is the constant that keeps us guided down the path. And so that's the way we've been governed for 250 years. Now, the second assumption that we have to make to move forward with this is that the problems we see are caused by a deficient or flawed U.S. Constitution. Because we're calling for amendments to the U.S. Constitution. So we have to be assuming that the problems we see are caused by that Constitution and that our proposal will repair that. Now, the things we're calling for are fiscal restraints, limits of power and jurisdictions of the federal government, and term limits of congressional representatives and senators. You know, I think a question we need to ask, are these things caused by a faulty U.S. Constitution? The debt that alarms me, and I think it does all of us, is a result of decisions made by the representatives and senators that we, the people, given the responsibility to elect them, sent to Washington. The resolution or the fix for that problem still lies with we, the people. And that bleeds over into the term limits thing as well. We have the solution or the remedy for that in our hands every time we go to the ballot box. The people that represent us there are elected. We are responsible for the people that represent us in the Senate and the House of Representatives. We are not given responsibility for those from other states. Very often when this discussion is held, people are very dissatisfied with senators or representatives from other states. But the U.S. Constitution does not give us any authority over those people or an avenue to deal with them. That's left to the people. I think the third thing I'd like to just point out, I think may be far the most important, is that dealing with the limit, the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. We're proposing a convention that would deal with that. Now, if we look at our situation here today, this summer, one federal judge decided and issued an opinion that our Kansas state constitution was flawed or deficient. And that our constitution that was implemented 150 years ago, although this was probably amendment came in much more recent than that required 2/3 majority vote, the judge says you can't do that. I firmly believe that the Constitution belongs to the people of Kansas, not a federal judge. And so when you think about what we're doing today, we're moving forward because we agree with a federal person who gets his authority from the federal government. And then we're going to propose amendments to limit the power of the federal government. It seems like a little bit of a dichotomy to me, and I think I would encourage you to think about these things and vote no on this concurrent resolution. Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in opposition to Senate Concurrent Resolution 1604. You all have heard me address this issue before. The difference, as my colleague just pointed out today, is that the federal court, courtesy of Judge Krause, inserted itself into the Kansas Constitution and the state of Kansas business. And I would think that that, in my judgment, was an overreach on the court's part, but I'm not on the court. Instead, I'm here to address two things we've heard from this well. The first one concerns me because it involves friends of mine. We heard that our members of Congress are at the trough. The implication is they're on the take. The implication is that they're bought and paid for. Now, I don't know my Congressman Estes very well. I've met him when he was state treasurer. He seems like a decent man to me. I don't think he's at the trough, and I don't think he's on the take. But of more importance is what I consider to be aspersions directed toward my senior senator, Jerry Moran, a man that I went to law school with, a man that I've respected throughout my professional life. And even though he and I disagree sometimes on politics and partisan matters, I don't appreciate people saying that members of Congress are at the trough.
Representative, excuse me, body, would you keep your side conversations to a minimum, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There might be a few, and if they are, they belong in the federal penitentiary. If we have members of Congress on the take who are at the trough, the voters ought to throw them out and they ought to be prosecuted. But to take a broad brush here today and characterize friends of mine like Jerry Moran as being at the trough, I find offensive. The second matter that causes me to rise here today is an issue that has only been tangentially mentioned here. I know that there is a well-organized lobbying effort, national lobbying effort, by lobbyists for the so-called Convention of the States. I know that they raise a great deal of money through mailings to people who may not be well informed about the issues. And the proof of that is they send the mail to my house. So I may not be properly informed about the issues. But what I read in their literature is that they believe that we can have a call for a constitutional convention, but we can somehow limit the topics that will be raised at a constitutional convention. And our next bill addresses an attempt in this legislature to limit what our delegates can do. And I'm not going to presume to argue that bill at this moment. But suffice to say, even with that bill, it has no impact on what delegates from other states do. The weight of legitimate opinion in constitutional law is that the Constitution says you call a constitutional convention, you get the results of that convention. You don't get to say, well, I want a constitutional convention because I think we ought to return slavery or some other cockamamie idea. When we vote when we vote to request a constitutional convention, we throw the doors open. I look at some of my friends whom I know are very dedicated, for example, to the Second Amendment and its preservation. Do you think delegates from California and Illinois and other blue states are going to sit idly by at a constitutional convention and not try to do something about guns? If you think that's the case, I would suggest you're perhaps naive. In addition, do you think that progressive Democrats, delegates from progressive Democratic states in particular, and even traditional rock rib Republicans are going to let a chance to enshrine the right of a woman to terminate a pregnancy into the Constitution? Do you think they're going to let that opportunity go by? If you care about the unborn, then now is the time for you to stand at their defense. Because if you vote for a constitutional convention, I can guarantee you that that's going to be one of the issues that's taken up there. So please think carefully before you follow the advice of the well-financed lobbyists who've been in this building this year and in past years. No matter what you think about a need for term limits, no matter what you think about governmental overreach, are you really ready to risk the Second Amendment? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the carrier please stand for a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. One of the previous colleagues at the well did mention about the court case and saying that we should not have to require 2/3 to pass this SCR. And I'm just curious, what is the plan for final action on how many votes it will take to pass this SCR?
Per the court, it's the simple majority.
Thank you. Thank you. I do have an issue with bypassing some parts of the process that I think we need to get in order before we rush a bill to pass on the simple majority. We have a ruling from a federal judge, but our state constitution still says that it requires a 2/3 to pass the Convention of States. But not only that, our House rules require that we follow what is written in the Kansas Constitution. So maybe there's going to be a plan to just have this pass upon simple majority, or maybe we'll take action to suspend our very own rules that we put in place. But I think some more needs to be done in order to make this feel good for those. I mean, I'm opposed to this bill. I'll be frank with you about that. But we should feel good that we're delivering a product that our people want. And I just think that we're skipping some of the best practices to get our ducks in a row here. And maybe you are going to have plans to suspend the rules, but I think at the very least we owe that to the people of Kansas to acknowledge that we had these rules in place. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the bill? Seeing none, Representative Schmoll, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, we hear all the time, if it's not broke, don't fix it. This is broke. The framers of the Constitution put this in specifically as an option to fix it. Everyone in this room has taken an oath to the Constitution. Article 5 is part of that Constitution. This is how we uphold that piece of our Constitution. I will say that it takes 34 states to hold a convention. Once that convention is held, that kicks back to the states to ratify. It takes 38 states to ratify what happened at the convention. Clearly, how we all come in here and have our own opinions and our own priorities, our own agendas to get things done, if you don't think that the states are going to come into that room with the same thing and everybody being contentious and arguing their own points and standing up. The idea that we're going to have 38 states all get on board with the same thing is pretty slim margins just to begin with. But that being said, since the Second Amendment was brought up, 29 states currently have some form or another of constitutional carry, permitless carry, if you will. To convince those 29 states to just do away with that, and then to take it back to their state, and then for their constituents to be okay with that, that's absurd. 41 states in the United States have some type of restriction on abortion. 13 have outright bans, and then the rest have some kind of gestational age. The idea that we're going to take these 41 states and somehow we're going to work it around to where that's the right to abortion is included, again, absurd. All that to say that, Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises to report, it reports SCR 1604 favorably for passage. Thank you.
You've heard the motion by Representative Schmoy to report SCR 1604 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. Division's been called. Clerk will open the roll and you can record your vote. Would like to remind everyone up in the gallery, a friendly reminder, please no pictures or video of the voting board. Does everyone have the opportunity to record their vote? Clerk will close the roll. With 78 in favor and 41 opposed, the motion carries.
Wow, Rita, that was a very
next item of business.
That was very quick. I was thrown off. I know you were thrown off too. We went straight to the debate, and it was a shorter debate than expected. I think we only had about 5 or 6 come up to speak on the bill, and that was SCR 1604, and we had 78 A's, 41 nays. So that means we go on to final passage tomorrow. Isn't that right, Rita? Oh, Rita, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Here I am. Yeah, in my excitement, I forgot to unmute. That's right, Andrew. So tomorrow will be the big day, the final vote for final passage for Kansas to become state number 20. And you're right, they went straight to SCR 1604 more quickly than we had expected. The debate was shorter than I expected. Frankly, I think that was one of the shortest debates we have seen in Kansas, likely because opponents saw the writing on the wall, is what I suspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really loved Representative Schmo. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. She came up and she debated some of the opposition by just using simple math. And I love that because you don't have to get into all these different logical arguments. You just look at the math, and it's not possible for anyone to come and hijack the convention and try and take away essential rights like the Second Amendment or other rights. So I just love that she did that. And I mean, that was a moment that stood out to me. What were some moments that stood out to you during this short debate that we saw?
Yeah, well, Representative Schmo, as you pointed out, was our floor leader today. And I think she did a great job. She kept her opening short and sweet. She knows what the numbers are and didn't see a need to, bloviate about it. I thought she did a great job. Representative Meyer, a Democrat, said, wait, an Article 5 convention has never been done before. It's scary. We're used to that. That's always expected. Then we had some great supportive legislators come and, take a stand in favor of this. Representative Johnson pointed out that a convention of the states is necessary to reform the federal government. And I thought it was fascinating. He said his constituents support this 4-1. Wow. And we need to do this to restore federalism. Representative Fairchild, I loved what he said. He said he used to be opposed to COS, but he changed his mind. So there you have it. There's proof, folks. If you've been working on your legislator who is opposed to COS, they can and do change their mind. So keep at it, be persistent. Representative Fairchild said over 600 of his constituents have signed the COS petition, and more people contact him about COS than about any other issue. That is incredible, folks. It's proof that grassroots activism works. Then we saw Representative Gardner. He is opposed to COS. He said, the usual, the problems aren't caused by the Constitution. Well, folks, that's overly simplistic, as we all know. Constitutional amendments can effectively put additional limitations on the federal government. They can force Congress to spend less of our money. They can impose term limits. There's no doubt about it. So his argument, in my opinion, not good. Representative Carmichael, a Democrat, tried to scare the other members, said, "Are you ready to risk the Second Amendment? Are you ready to have abortion enshrined in the Constitution?" Well, no, we're not going to be afraid of that because we can count. We've done the math. There are not 26 states to approve of those kinds of amendments at the convention, and there are certainly not 38 states to ratify that kind of amendment. So take your fear somewhere else, Representative Carmichael. Then we had Representative Schmo do the closing. She did a great job. She said the framers included the convention process specifically as a way to fix the broken federal government. And she pointed out how ridiculous it is to suggest that a crazy amendment could be ratified by 38 states. So that's a little recap if you missed it, folks. And Andrew, now do we have some folks standing by on the ground to talk to us?
I'm not sure. Looks like we're waiting on Deanna to come back.
Okay.
So producer G is going to bring them in when they're ready.
Okay.
Real quick, though, if you don't mind, there was a couple of times throughout the debate where so people talked about there was the court case that required a supermajority of the legislature to pass an Article 5 resolution. And what was weird to me is some people kind of indicated that they believed that the state constitution was supreme to the federal constitution, and that kind of threw me off. But there might have been a few people who were tuning in today who were not really sure what some of those representatives were talking about with that court case. Can you touch on that for just a second?
Sure. Well, just in a nutshell, the Kansas Constitution does have a provision that requires or purports to require a 2/3 supermajority vote of the Kansas legislature in order to apply for an Article 5 convention, which is what we're doing today with SCR 1604, or to ratify a constitutional amendment. And our very own Michael Ferris was lead counsel in the court case representing some Kansas state legislators in challenging that provision, because the fact is, and as a federal court ruled just recently, that provision violates the U.S. Constitution, because Article 5 gives the power to apply for a convention solely to the state legislature, not to the governor, not to all the people in the state. The Constitution gives it to the Kansas state legislature. So a state cannot use its constitutional process to make it harder for the state legislature to apply for an Article 5 convention. And yes, it was very odd to hear some of these Kansas legislators who presumably know at least the basics about the Constitution, that a state constitution cannot override the federal Constitution. No. We have the supremacy clause, right? Yeah, the federal Constitution takes precedent, and because of Article 5, only a simple majority is required to pass an Article 5 application. So we'll be interested to see how this plays out tomorrow with the final vote. It definitely sounded to me like a couple of the opponents want to try to bring this up to muddy the waters a little bit. So we'll see what happens tomorrow, Andrew.
Yeah, it's a shame that they're going to this, but you know, when you have nothing else to hang your hat on, I guess you got to go to things like that.
That's it.
So it doesn't look like we have. Looks like we don't have Mark or Deanna coming on, but we will have them tomorrow, Rita.
Yes,
because we are going to be coming back again. We have we have another debate. Oh, actually, we have Mark coming, so we'll hold on.
Great.
Here in just a few moments.
Yeah, while we're waiting for him, Andrew, I'll just add that the Kansas House right now has moved on to consider a 34 ready bill that has been introduced in the Kansas House, and that's you heard one reference to it in the debate today. That's the piece where the Kansas legislature sets forth what their process will be for choosing, instructing, and overseeing the commissioners who will go to the Article 5 convention to represent the state legislature there. So that is up for consideration right now. We're not going to live stream that whole discussion and debate as well, but we'll keep you posted tomorrow on how that goes. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think we have Mark and Deanna now.
Yep, there they are. Hey, you two, how are you doing? How are you feeling right now with the debate and that overwhelming?
Hey, we can't hear you. I don't know if you guys can hear us. It says we're in the show and we're live, so we're just going to jump in. That was pretty exciting to watch for me anyway. 13 years in the making, incredible to see that happen. There's a big lesson in this for me. Of course, we're not passed yet. Just so you guys understand, that was just a cloture vote. And that just means that now tomorrow they go to the final vote, right?
Correct?
Yeah.
About the same time?
So about the same time, we'll see the final vote tomorrow. The big lesson for me in this is 13 years, you stick with it, you stay in. Anything big requires long-term commitment. Anything worth doing is hard. This has been incredibly hard for the Kansas team. I'm really proud of them.
Absolutely. One of the things I told our Colorado team on Monday night when I joined them is this is a marathon. It has been 13 years. We've got some recorded footage that we're going to post, a little bit of history from Dave Schneider and Chuck Akins. And it takes endurance. And one of the things that I reminded our folks is, I'm just spacing out here, sorry, is that we didn't lose this country overnight. We didn't lose this country in 20 years, 30 years. It's been in my lifetime. And, the last 50 years, and we're not going to get it back in a short time. So this is a lifestyle change, and we've all got to stay in some kind of role, locally, statewide, federal, whatever it takes. And we've got to stay working.
Yeah. And look, this is hard. I don't want people to think, I think it's easy. When I travel around the country, Deanna gets this a lot too. People are like, well, how long is it going to take? And it's so frustrating. And, I'm standing around here in the halls. There's a bunch of grassroots activists here. One, I'm seeing a bunch of the challenge coin pins, which makes my heart glad. That means those are people who are serious warriors like Deanna and a lot of others. And I'm seeing people that are like, hey, I've been doing this 10 years. I've been doing it 12 years. Dave Schneider was the first state director here, right? And then he was our regional director, who you work for. And now he's actually our paid lobbyist here. And he's been here for 13 years working on this. So this takes a long time. It's hard. One thing that keeps coming back to me biblically, you've heard me talk about this, Deanna, is Joshua. I don't know what happened. I don't normally choose like a verse every year, but Joshua's just been on my mind. And Joshua is chosen by God to lead the Israelites into the promised land, to take the land, because he was a man of spirit. And what God meant by that is when the spies went out to check out the land of Canaan, all 10 spies said, no, can't do it. They're big, they're scary, it's too hard, we're weak. And it was Joshua and Caleb that said, no, we should do this. That's our land. We're supposed to take it. We're going to do what is intended for us to do. And then when Moses was up on the mountain talking to God and getting the tablets for 40 days, all the Israelites they made a molten calf, right? A golden calf. They turned to pagan gods, not Joshua. Joshua held faith. He went up halfway up the mountain and camped. And so because of that, he was allowed to see the promised land, to go into the promised land. Joshua, Caleb, and Moses, when Moses didn't get to go, Joshua and Caleb went in, right? And they got to see the promised land because they were men of spirit. And what God meant by that is they stayed in the fight and they didn't quit and they didn't get discouraged and they just kept going. So when I come to a legislature like this and I meet people like you who've been in it so long, and Dave Schneider and all these other folks that have been around since the beginning, what I see are men and women of spirit. And that's what it's going to take if we're going to save the country. It's not a tomorrow thing, right? I wish it were tomorrow. I want it to be tomorrow. By the way, just so you guys know how dedicated, last night I slept in my car here in town. My hotel room got canceled. Couldn't find another hotel. I just slept in the back of my car in a truck stop because what I want to be is I want to be like Joshua. I'm going to go up on the mountain. I'm going to wait. Like I'm going to do no matter what. I'm going to say we can take the land. Article 5 was given to us by the framers of the Constitution because they knew this was going to happen. They gave us this gift and they said, you will need this gift. We want you to take it and use it. And I think that's a great parallel to the Joshua story.
Absolutely. And of those millions of people that Moses was leading, two is all we've got to go into the promised land. And that's what we get to live on, is that promise.
Yep. So that's what we got, guys. We can't hear you. So I think we'll drop off, Rita, and we'll let you guys close it out. And we'll be back again tomorrow. I promise you, I'm not going to sleep in my car tonight. I hope. Michelle, please. I'm going to try not to sleep in my car. And so maybe I'll look better and sound better tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. See you tomorrow. Well, Rita, this is grassroots reporting. This is just what happens. We kind of roll with the punches. Debate was shorter than we thought. We went straight into SCR 1604. Deanna and Mark had a hard time hearing us. But you know what? It's really just electrifying to see the grassroots get this thing to get where we're at right now. And it's really credit to them and to all that they've done, and credit to Deanna and credit to Mark and to you and so many others for just persevering over 10 years to get where we were at right now. So tomorrow we have 10 a.m. Eastern time for final debate. And if we are successful tomorrow, Kansas will be state number 20. And just before we wrap up, I just want you to share, what do you think the significance is of us being at state number 20 if we are successful tomorrow?
I think it's huge, just entering the next level, going from 19 to 20, just like going from 9 to 10, entering the 20s is a big deal. And I think it's going to give such a boost to our teams all over the country. We're looking at action starting in South Dakota anytime now. So I think South Dakota is going to hear, Lord willing, they're going to hear Kansas just became state number 20. And I think you're going to see states really take that momentum and run with it. So this is so exciting. It's been a great day. Again, the vote was 78 to 41 today. So we move on to a final vote tomorrow. Andrew, I'm not sure we know what time it is yet. So everybody just stay tuned. We'll definitely get the word out about the exact time tomorrow. I might be wrong. Maybe you know something I don't, but I'm not sure. I think it's likely to be around the same time as today. But yeah, tomorrow there shouldn't be any debate. There could be some discussion about the rules, as I mentioned earlier, but other than that, should just be the vote. And so far, wow, it's looking good. So yeah.
Well, with that, make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube and socials. That way, regardless of the time, you will get a notification when we are going live, because we don't want you to miss a thing. We are in this fight with you, and we want you to see the debate tomorrow and the final passage tomorrow. So please pray for Kansas to be successful and that we'll have state number 20 tomorrow. Make sure that you join us at conventionofstates.com/COS live. Rita, until then, we got a country to save. So it's time for us to get back to work. We'll see you tomorrow.